Sophie Rowell, thanks so much for your time talking to us in the lead up to the Bendigo Chamber Music Festival. I wanted to start by talking about your background as a quartet musician because playing in a string quartet has been a huge part of your career, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It really was the bulk of my career from what I can remember, actually. I just was drawn to that string quartet, and then it became such a big part of my life. I can't believe it, actually, when I look back at it.
Can you tell us about the origins of the tank string quartet?
Yeah, funny origins, actually. I came to Melbourne to watch the Melbourne International Chamber Music Competition, and the quartet in the first round, called the Aviv Quartet, who ended up winning actually, played the first couple of notes of the Debussy String Quartet, and I thought that's what I need to do. So then I knew that a couple of my friends were coming back to Australia from Banff, and they'd recently had a string quartet break-up, as if you like. They all went amicably in different directions. So that was Sally Bowden and Pat Murphy, and eventually Anne Horton joined us. And I think the best thing for us was my teacher, Alice Watton, was teaching at the Australian Institute of Music, which was run by Peter Calvo, a very inspiring visionary who took us under his wing and made us in residence there, sort of gave us a home. And without a home, a young string quartet is very hard to keep going. So it was just very fortunate that everything came our way.
And it's interesting that people might not realise that we know that musicians, like single musicians, can go overseas and study with teachers and do competitions and things. But chamber music ensembles can do the same thing. And the Tank String Quartet actually studied with mentors overseas, didn't it?
Yes, quite a lot. In fact, one year we went over 7 times to Europe, and at that point we looked at each other and we thought, why don't we just move here for a bit? So we had a wonderful organisation called Pro Quartet in France, through whom we had lessons with Walter Levine from the La Salle Quartet. And we even had lessons with Norbert Bryan and Amadeus Quartet. But then our main bulk of it was studying with the Alban Berg Quartet for 15 months. 18 months, something like that, which was just incredible.
And these are legendary names in the world of string quartet playing.
Yes, everything sort of fell our way. We were really lucky. But mind you, we never went down the American route, so we were very much stuck in that Middle European tradition of string quartet playing.
And so would there have been a different sort of tradition had you gone to study in America? I mean, would that have resulted in a different approach to your art or a different sound?
Most definitely a different sound. I'm not sure about the approach, but the sound is a little bit more impressive from the American point of view. I find that I love actually the sound of French quartets too. It's cliche, but they're suave playing. I adore, but then it's the warmth of the Czech quartets and the Germans and the Austrians that really is what inspires me for the sound as a violinist. But at the end of the day, I think we didn't really have a sound of any country, and that's what we were, sort of this Australian new sound, whatever that may work out to be. So people would listen to us very differently, and I think that's why we were noticed so much.
And then the Tank String Quartet was taken. I don't want to say taken over, taken under. The Tank String Quartet became the Australian String Quartet, and you were then based in Adelaide. And so your career then would have been, I imagine, very much more Australian-based.
Absolutely. We did maintain our connections with Germany and England, and would go on a tour or two there every year while we were Australian String Quartet. But what I think we did, we would just came at the right time for us. We were finishing up with our studies, and we were looking at making a career based in Germany. We had an agent or two over there that were looking after us, but to have that be under the umbrella of the Australian String Quartet gave us a home, it gave us a salary, it gave us concert platform throughout the country, and let us just concentrate on being a string quartet. It was an absolute gift.
And so then as the ASQ, you took on then, I imagine, the mentor role, and you would have been mentoring younger up-and-coming ensembles.
Yes, look, we did that quite a lot as part of our touring. A little bit at the Elder Conservatorium of Music in Adelaide, where we were based, but also all around the country, and a lot with primary school students as we were on our travels.
Primary school students play chamber music. I always think of that as a high school thing.
It's not so much as chamber music, but just showing them what the string quartet is.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, I particularly remember we actually, as part of the Queensland Music Festival, went up right into Cape York and were able to play at the school in Arakoon. And look, we did it outside, we played away, we showed them our instruments, and it was one of the most memorable few days of my life, actually, being up there.
I think that's what you would call a real cross-cultural exchange experience.
Yeah, and I think I feel like I came away knowing a lot more. I probably learned a lot more than all the children did.
Now, with chamber ensembles, again, people who don't play instruments or play in ensembles might not really understand the dynamic of how an ensemble like a string quartet works, because with a bigger ensemble like an orchestra, you've got a conductor out the front who helps set the tempo and helps sort of run the show. But how does that sort of leadership become obvious in or work in a string quartet? I mean, does the first violinist have that role, or is it much more democratic? Can you explain that sort of process to us?
Yeah, look, I think obviously every group is different, and it just happens to be a harmony of personalities, I think. And you, like it anywhere in life, you find your role within that group. It does often happen that the first violin can be the dominant personality, but I know of quartets where the cellist is the one that leads it. I think you do need a leader otherwise you can go around in circles too much if you're slightly too democratic. And I mean, it's no secret that I probably was that sort of a leader, but that didn't mean that everybody didn't get an equal voice and that everybody's opinion wasn't heard, because that is really important. Basically, as the leader, I guess I just would make sure that we were running on time and wouldn't run out of time to rehearse everything. That was my specialty, whereas Sally's specialty was finding a musical phrase that made sense within the whole piece, or Anne would find the accompaniment. Everybody has their different, if you like, leading roles, but we're doing it differently.
And I think it's interesting also to note that, say, if one person leaves an ensemble, it's not just a case of finding another person. It's like a marriage, isn't it? You have to find someone that really fits the way the group works, the way the group feels, and it's a thing that's very hard to put into words, isn't it?
Yes, we were incredibly lucky in our quartet that when Patrick Murphy left, Rachel Johnston joined us, and it was seamless. That crossover. She was just incredible and fitted it in beautifully.
And that's rare.
I think so, but I know I was speaking with Monique Lappins from the New Zealand String Quartet earlier this year. She was saying how part of her audition process was actually to stay a few nights in the others' houses to see how compatible they were as personalities. So I've never heard of that before, but actually it makes sense, because you really do live together an awful lot when you're on the road and travelling like that.
It's a very special sort of arrangement, and it's one which is interesting with something like the Bendigo Chamber Music Festival, where people, even though you might know each other and might have performed together before, coming together for an intensive rehearsal and performance period like this, it's interesting to see that if the personalities are going to work under those sort of hothouse situations.
Yes, Howard and Chris get fabulous people, and this year I'm lucky enough to know everybody who's coming, but you do get thrown together. I think that's part of the art of making chamber music, is that you can work with everybody. I've certainly worked with a few prickly personalities in my life, but at the end of the day you just have to get that music onto the stage and at its best for the audience, and so kind of make sure that you work with those personalities and sort of them down a little bit and,
Yes.
and get them there, if you like. I'm trying to say it politely.
No, but for you as a violinist and a member of the ensemble of musicians coming to Bendigo this year, it's going to be a very different experience to last year, isn't it? Because sadly the musicians from the Chamber Orchestra of Europe can't be involved.
Well, the world is a different place than it was 12 months ago, isn't it? And that was such a wonderful experience for me to meet those people last year and to play with them and to bounce and reflect on their ideas. I'm not saying that it won't this year, but the other thing this year, it will feel a lot more, in a way, comfortable. It's like putting on your favourite leisure wear because you know everybody that you're working with, and so you can just click into place. So it'll be it's always, I think there's that excitement of the unknown that makes festivals so special, and I'm pretty sure that's what the audience feels as well. There is a sense of unknown, especially when you get programs put together like Chris and Howard do, where the repertoire is not all that familiar.
Well, that's one of the things I loved about last year's festival, is the fact that the program really went outside the usual repertoire that we hear in concerts. And I think that's the beauty of festivals, and the reason we need festivals is to do that, to remind us that there are more pieces out there than the ones that we hear often and love. And certainly looking at the 2021 program, that's the case. I've gone through and had a look at the things that you're down to play, and top of the list is a work that I haven't heard for a long while, which is the Bartók Contrasts, which is a sensational piece, but it's one that I've only ever heard live maybe 2 or 3 times, and I don't know whether I'm just not going to concerts enough, but is it one that you get to play often?
Not all that often, and I played it a couple of years ago for the first time in 20 years. So it doesn't come up all that often for me, but I love it. Yeah. It's such excitement to play that work, and I always have to have a stunt violin sitting by me ready for the opening of the last movement because I need to have a different violin tuned differently. So
yes, that's something that people often look at and say, why is that other violin there? But Bartók calls for a violin tuned differently for that movement, doesn't he?
Yes, just for that first page, just for a first little while, and you play those open strings, it sounds devilish actually, because they're tuned much tight. The strings are tuned into much tighter intervals than you're used to. But then the piano plays a little riff, and at that point you have to quickly put that violin down and grab your other one. So it's like not only do you have to play all the notes, but you've got to coordinate this other stuff.
Yes.
It's funny. Playing with the clarinet, they're so used to picking up a million clarinets.
Yes.
But violinists, we don't do that very often.
And that is an unusual combination, isn't it? Violin, clarinet, and piano. There are not a lot of works for that combination.
Not a whole heap. Bartók, he wrote that with Tigeti and Benny Goodman. Right. Is the original recording. Yeah. Have you? It's just incredible. Really
I haven't heard it.
Listening to 3 masters.
Yeah. And then a work that I've talked to both Daniel Debora and Chris Howlett about, the Mendelssohn Third Piano Quartet, and they both had very interesting things to say about it. Daniel, in that it's terrifyingly difficult and it's like a piano concerto, and Chris saying that yes, it's terrifyingly difficult and like a piano concerto, but he can't wait to play it again because it's such a cracking piece. Is it a piece that you've encountered before?
Never.
Oh, really?
In fact, I didn't realise he'd written 3. I thought he'd only written 2 piano quartets.
Yeah, they're very early, apparently.
Yes, and I think he was 16, so it must be around those, just after those string sonatas and around the octet.
It's just before the octet, yeah.
Just before, right. And so I looked at it the other day, and I must admit, having never, you listen to it in the background, and I looked at my part, and I thought to myself, well, Daniel must have a really hard part. Because if the first violin part doesn't look that tricky, you know that it must all be in the piano.
Yeah. It's clearly a vehicle that Mendelssohn was writing for himself, being a virtuoso, even at that age. But it's a piece that both Daniel and Chris have said is sensational. So I don't know it at all, so I'm really looking forward to it. Now, another thing that was a wonderful feature of the 2020 festival was your involvement with Toby Breeder and Chris Howell in the Beethoven Opus 9 string trios, where we heard all three of the set over 3 days. And that's another thing that you can do in festivals. You can focus on a body of work like that. And I note that you're continuing your passion for the string trio. I talked to Chris about this, but what's your take on your work with the string trio in this festival?
I think last year playing those Opus 9s was actually for me the highlight of the festival.
Mm-hmm.
Playing that real body of Opus works and to see how they developed, and rarely get that chance to do something like that in such a short space of time. So I'm delighted. And look, I love spending time with Chris and Toby. I think I love playing with them, and we get along well, and I think we match together well. So it's just a pleasure to spend time with them, let alone rehearse. It's a bonus. And that Opus 3 trio, I've only ever played the first movement when I was about as young as you knew me in Adelaide, which means I was about 13 years old. So I've never come back to it in my life. When you play string quartets, you don't play string trios because somebody misses out. So
but there is a large body of work for string trio, and it's one of those genres that tends to get overshadowed by the quartet, perhaps for obvious reasons, because there is so much great music for string quartet. But that doesn't in any way denigrate the music that some of the greatest people have written for string trio.
No, I agree. I think it's actually something I've turned to a lot recently. I played Goldberg variations too with Tippy from ACO and Chris Moore. And
I heard that. That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
Oh, I think there's something about the three voices which, while the quartet's intimate, somehow the string trio seems even more so, doesn't it? Because
as an ex-viola player, I remember I loved playing string trios because I felt that I could be heard more for some reason, that the viola colour and the cello colour and the violin colour are more sort of differentiated.
Actually, I agree. You're right, and that it does stand out a lot more, and has such a pivotal role. Playing string trio without a second violin to my left, I, as a violinist, feel a little bit more exposed, and it makes me work harder to have a more viola-like sound, and that's not a bad thing either.
So then you're playing the Schumann Piano Quartet, one of the pieces that's a passion of Howard Penny's, and that I should have mentioned too that the string trios, Chris is leading a discussion, like a concert conversation on the trios, and then you're playing the Beethoven Opus 3 and an Albrechtsberger string trio, which is a real rarity. And then Howard Penny is leading a discussion the next day on the Schumann Piano Quartet, and then 2 performances of it following. That's a busy day for everyone.
Oh, look, what would it be? It wouldn't be a festival with Chris and Howard if we weren't absolutely busy. But to top it off with the Schumann Piano Quartet, I'm not complaining. That work it takes your breath away, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it tends to be overshadowed by the piano quintet. Again, it's one of those pieces that doesn't get played as often.
No, and I think I've played that quintet a million times, and look, I love it, but there's something for me much more meaningful about the quartet. It might be because of that slow movement, which it just moves me to tears every time.
And then Mendelssohn's String Octet. What can we say about that?
Party.
But it is one of those pieces that, particularly the last movement. I mean, the last movement is out of this world, and it has audiences holding their breath with the excitement. I imagine the performers too, but it must always be a joy to play.
I love it. Even as soon as you said it, my face lit into a smile. I would play that again and again, and have played it. How many times I can't tell you, but if it comes up on a program or people are looking for something, and I know everybody's heard it a million times, but it doesn't matter. It's still as fresh as anything that when you're living through that performance, isn't it?
Yes. And what was he, 16 when he wrote
I
it?
know, it's ridiculous.
It defies description, really.
Yes,
I
I wasn't
love
doing that when I was 16.
exactly. I love the fact too that the festival is ending with all the strings playing the Joseph Suk Strings Serenade, which is a glorious piece.
It's just a lush. I think Sook, actually, the chamber music and the music of Sook, we should maybe pay a bit more attention to it. I think I certainly know the piano quartets too is on the program too. I think.
Yes, it's in an Opus 1 concert. Yes.
Yeah. So, and look, that doesn't sound like Opus 1, and now this serenade, it's a celebration of lush harmony, and I'm into that. That's for sure.
I know people who prefer it to the Dvorak String Serenade, and that's probably almost heresy to say that because the Dvorak is such a beautiful and popular work. But the Suk is really up there with the Dvorak, isn't it?
I think so, and a little. It's so accessible, but I think it's because we just don't recognise the composer, that it's not played as much.
Yes, yes. And again, that's one of the great things about a festival. I mean, we have music by Albrechtsberger. I can't remember the last time I heard a work by Albrechtsberger.
Neither can I.
But he's a very important figure in music. He taught Beethoven, he taught Schubert, and he was regarded as one of the preeminent music teachers in Vienna in the first couple of decades of the 19th century. And to hear his sonata for string trio alongside that Beethoven Opus 3 will be really instructive, knowing that that's probably the time that he was teaching Beethoven.
It's extraordinary how you can make those links and how we've missed those links as time's gone by, understandably. But I love it when it's brought to light and we can work through it again.
Well, a great deal of music will be brought to light in this festival. Sophie, it's been great to talk to you, and I'm looking forward immensely to hearing you on stage here in Bendigo.
Oh, as am I, and thank you very much, Graham.